In the misty village of Marwood, a master calligrapher lies dead in his locked studio, poisoned, with his priceless ebony scroll, black parchment shimmering with gold ink, stolen. Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, unravels a web of greed, envy, and secrets. A cunning collector, a devoted apprentice, and a nervous merchant all have motives, and a hidden passage reveals no one is safe. Can Poirot decode the scroll's deadly legacy before the killer strikes again? Dive into a twisting tale of murder and deception. Chapter 1. The Silent Studio. The autumn wind carried a sharp bite as Hercule Poirot descended from the carriage onto the uneven cobblestones of St. Aldan's Lane, in the heart of the drowsy village of Marwood. His patent leather shoes gleamed despite the dust, and with a fastidious flick of his gloved hand, he adjusted the brim of his Homburg hat. The air was heavy with the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke, and the gray sky pressed low, lending the scene an air of quiet foreboding. Marwood was not a place accustomed to drama, yet drama had found it. Inspector Japp stood waiting outside a charming, ivy-draped building, its leaded windows catching the faint light like the eyes of a watchful sentinel. The brass plaque beside the door read, "Edmund Varnum, calligrapher." Japp's usually ruddy face was drawn, his mustache drooping with the weight of the morning's discovery. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp said, his voice low, "you've come at a bad time. Varnum's dead, found this morning in his studio. Door bolted from the inside, no sign of a struggle. And his latest work, a scroll, they say it's worth a mint, is gone." Poirot's green eyes flickered with interest, his mustache giving the faintest quiver. "A locked room, a death, and a theft," he mused, his Belgian accent precise. "The stage is set for a puzzle, n'est-ce pas?" "Tell me more." My friend Japp gestured toward the studio door. "Found by his apprentice, Miss Henshaw, when she arrived at 9. She had to break a window to get in. Poor girl's a wreck. The local doctor's with the body now, but it looks like poison. There's a cup of tea on the desk, barely touched." Poirot nodded, his mind already turning. "Poison is a subtle choice, Inspector. And the scroll, this missing treasure, what do we know of it?" "Called the Ebony Scroll," Japp replied, rubbing his hands against the chill. "Black parchment, gold ink, some ancient technique. Varnum was working on it for a private buyer. Word is, it's priceless." They stepped into the studio, and Poirot paused to absorb the scene. The room was a haven of meticulous order, a testament to the calligrapher's craft. A long oak desk stood against one wall, its surface a parade of precision, ink bottles arranged by hue, quills and brushes laid out like soldiers at attention, and a single sheet of parchment bearing half-finished script, the strokes bold yet delicate. Shelves held rolls of vellum and leather-bound books, their spines worn but cherished. A faint scent of ink and wax hung in the air, mingling with something sharper, almost imperceptible. Edmund Varnum's body was slumped in a high-backed chair, his head tilted back, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. His face, once expressive, was now a mask of death, the lips faintly blue, the hands limp in his lap. Beside him, on the desk, sat the aforementioned teacup, its contents dark and cold, a saucer beneath it unmarred by a single drop. Poirot leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the cup without touching it. "The tea," he said softly. "It is not disturbed. No spills, no signs of a struggle. This was no accident." Inspector Japp nodded grimly. "That's what I thought. The doctor's taking samples, but I'd bet my badge it's cyanide. Quick, quiet, and deadly." Poirot straightened, his gaze sweeping the room. The windows, small and set high in the walls, were latched tight, their panes intact, save for the one Miss Henshaw had broken. The door, heavy oak with a sturdy bolt, bore no scratches or marks of force. A single key rested on the desk, presumably Varnum's own. The floor, polished wood, showed no scuffs beyond the expected wear of a working studio. "A locked room," Poirot murmured, tapping his cane lightly against the floor. "Yet the scroll is gone, and the man is dead. The method, it reveals the mind of the killer. We must ask, who had access to this sanctum?" Japp scratched his chin. "3 people, as far as we know. Miss Clara Henshaw, his apprentice. She was here last night, locked up when she left. Lord Reginald Carver, a toff who collects old manuscripts, visited yesterday afternoon. And Tobias Finch, a merchant who supplies Varnum's inks and papers, dropped by around the same time." Poirot's eyes gleamed. 3 suspects, each with their own connection to our victim, and each, perhaps, with a reason to desire this ebony scroll. We shall meet them, Inspector, and observe the little details, the gestures, the hesitations that betray the heart. As they stepped back into the chill of St. Alden's Lane, Poirot's mind was already at work, arranging the facts like pieces on a chessboard. A locked studio, a poisoned cup, a missing masterpiece, each element a thread in a tapestry of deceit. He smiled faintly, his gray cells humming. The game, as always, had begun. Chapter 2. The 3 Suspects. The morning mist lingered over Marwood, curling like a ghostly veil around the gabled roofs and narrow lanes. Hercule Poirot stood outside Edmund Varnum's studio, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the ivy-clad facade, as though it might whisper its secrets. The air was sharp with the scent of damp earth, and the village, though stirring with the day's business, seemed to hold its breath in the wake of the calligrapher's death. Inspector Japp, ever practical, paced beside him, his boots scuffing the cobblestones. "We've got our work cut out, Poirot," Japp said, his voice gruff. "A locked room, a poisoned man, and a scroll worth a fortune, gone. The sooner we speak to those who knew Varnum best, the better." Poirot nodded, his mustache giving a delicate twitch. "Indeed, mon ami. The heart of this mystery lies not only in the how, but in the why. To steal a scroll and kill a man requires motive, and motive is found in the souls of those closest to the victim. Let us meet these 3 suspects you have mentioned. Their words, their glances, they will tell us much." Japp led the way to the village inn, the Rose and Crown, where the 3 individuals with access to Varnum's studio had been asked to wait. The inn was a sturdy, timber-framed building, its low ceilings and dark wood beams giving it a cozy, if slightly oppressive, atmosphere. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room. The suspects sat at separate tables, each isolated in their own thoughts, their postures betraying varying degrees of unease. Poirot's keen eyes took in the scene as he entered, his small, precise steps carrying him to the center of the room. He adjusted his immaculate coat and turned to Japp. "Introduce them, if you please, Inspector. And let us observe the little details, for they are the threads that weave the truth." Japp cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Right then. This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot, come to assist in the investigation. He'll have questions, so mind you answer straight." The first to rise was Lord Reginald Carver, a tall, angular man in his late 50s, with a face as sharp as a blade. His gray hair was impeccably combed, and his tailored suit spoke of wealth, though his thin lips and cold blue eyes suggested a temperament more calculating than generous. He extended a hand, which Poirot shook briefly, noting the firmness of the grip and the faint tremor beneath it. "Lord Carver," Japp said, "a collector of rare manuscripts and a frequent visitor to Varnum's studio." Carver inclined his head, his voice smooth but edged with impatience. "A tragedy, Monsieur Poirot. Edmund Varnum was a genius, his work unparalleled. The Ebony Scroll, his latest creation, was to be a masterpiece. Black parchment, gold ink, a technique lost to time. Its value." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Well, it's priceless, naturally." Poirot's gaze lingered on Carver's face, noting the way his fingers tightened around the head of his cane. "You admired this scroll, my lord. You saw it, perhaps?" "Once, briefly," Carver replied, his tone guarded. "Varnum showed me its progress last month. He was secretive, as always, but I could see its potential. I offered to purchase it, generously, I might add, but he refused. Said it was for a private buyer." Poirot tilted his head, his expression bland but his eyes sharp. "A refusal. It can sting, non? Especially for a man accustomed to acquiring what he desires." Carver's jaw tightened, but he offered a thin smile. "I don't deny my interest, Monsieur Poirot. But murder? That's a leap." Poirot said nothing, merely nodding as he turned to the next suspect. Miss Clara Henshaw sat at a corner table, her small frame hunched over a cup of untouched tea. She was no more than 25, with pale skin and dark hair pinned haphazardly, as though she had dressed in haste. Her hands, stained with ink, fidgeted with a handkerchief, and her brown eyes darted nervously as Poirot approached. She rose awkwardly, nearly upsetting her chair. "Miss Henshaw," Japp said, "Varnum's apprentice. Been with him 3 years, learning the trade." Clara's voice was soft, trembling slightly. I can't believe he's gone. Mr. Varnum was so kind, so patient. I found him this morning, you know. I came to the studio at 9 as usual, but the door was bolted. I called out, but there was no answer. I had to break the window to get in." Her eyes filled with tears, and she pressed the handkerchief to her lips. Poirot's expression softened, though his gaze remained piercing. "A terrible shock, mademoiselle. You were close to Monsieur Varnum, yes? He was your mentor?" She nodded, swallowing hard. "He taught me everything, how to mix inks, how to hold the quill just so. He said I had talent, but I'll never be as good as he was." "And this ebony scroll," Poirot said gently. "You saw it in the studio?" "Yes, last night," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I left at 8, and he was still working on it. It was on his desk, half finished. So beautiful. I touched it just to feel the parchment, and he scolded me. Said it was too precious to handle carelessly." Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. "A scolding. It can linger in the heart, non? You locked the door when you left, you say?" "Yes," she said quickly. "I always did." He insisted on it, to keep his work safe. Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing his mustache as he turned to the final suspect. Mr. Tobias Finch stood by the window, his round face flushed and his hands clasped tightly in front of him. He was a man of middle age, slightly stout, with a balding head and a nervous habit of rubbing his palms together. His tweed suit was well worn, and his eyes darted between Poirot and Japp, as though expecting an accusation at any moment. "Mr. Finch," Japp said, "merchant of fine papers and inks. Supplied Varnum's materials for years, Finch bobbed his head, offering a strained smile. "That's right, sir. I was at the studio yesterday afternoon, delivering a batch of special ink for the Ebony Scroll, gold-flecked, imported from Italy. Cost a pretty penny. I can tell you Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. You saw Monsieur Varnum, then? He was in good health?" "Oh, yes," Finch said, his words tumbling out. "Cheerful as you like. We chatted a bit about the weather, the trade. I left by 6, well before Miss Henshaw locked up. I swear I had nothing to do with whatever happened." Poirot studied Finch's anxious demeanor, noting the sweat beading on his brow despite the cool room. "A merchant knows value, monsieur. This scroll, it was valuable, yes?" Finch nodded vigorously. "Oh, very. Black parchment's rare, and that gold ink, well, it's not something you see every day. But I'm just a supplier, Monsieur Poirot. I don't meddle in my clients' affairs." Poirot smiled faintly, his mind cataloguing every word, every gesture. He turned to Japp, his voice low. 3 suspects, 3 motives, perhaps. Lord Carver, a man of wealth and ambition, who covets what he cannot buy. Miss Henshaw, a devoted student, perhaps too devoted, with access to the studio's secrets. And Monsieur Finch, a merchant who knows the price of everything, and perhaps the profit in theft. Japp grunted, his eyes narrowing. "You think one of them did it?" "I think," Poirot said, "that we must look deeper. The Ebony Scroll is not merely a work of art. It is a key to desire, to greed, perhaps to betrayal. Tell me, Inspector, what do we know of this scroll's purpose?" Japp scratched his chin. "Not much, I'm afraid. Varnum was tight-lipped about it. All we know is it was commissioned by a private buyer, someone abroad, according to Carver. Varnum was working on it for months, kept it under lock and key. Miss Henshaw said it was nearly finished, but no one's seen it since last night." Poirot's eyes sparkled. "A commission, a secret buyer, a locked studio. The pieces, they begin to form a picture, but it is not yet clear. Let us return to the studio, Inspector. The scene of the crime. It speaks when one knows how to listen." They left the inn, the suspect's eyes following them as they went. The village was waking fully now, with villagers casting curious glances at the strangers in their midst. Poirot walked with his usual measured pace, his cane tapping lightly on the cobblestones, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities. The Rose and Crown had revealed much, but not enough. The studio, he felt, held the key to unlocking the mystery. Back at St. Alden's Lane, the studio stood silent, its broken window boarded up by the local constable. Inside, the air was still heavy with the scent of ink and death. Poirot moved to the desk, his eyes lingering on the half-finished parchment Varnum had left behind. The script was exquisite, each stroke a testament to the calligrapher's skill, but it was not the Ebony Scroll. That, according to Clara, had been a roll of black parchment, its surface shimmering with gold. Poirot turned to Japp, his voice thoughtful. "This scroll, it is not merely valuable for its beauty. It holds a significance we do not yet understand. Why steal it? Why kill for it? The answer lies in the hearts of those we have met, and perhaps in the studio itself." He approached the shelves, running a gloved finger along the edges of the books and rolls of vellum. His touch was light, almost reverent, as though he were communing with the spirit of the dead man. He paused at a small wooden box, its lid inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Opening it, he found a collection of quills, each wrapped in tissue, and a vial of black ink flecked with gold, identical to the one Finch had described. "Interesting," Poirot murmured. "The tools of the trade, so carefully preserved. Yet the scroll, the masterpiece, is gone." Japp frowned, his patience wearing thin. "What are you getting at, Poirot? You think the scroll's still here?" "No, mon ami," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But I think the studio has more to tell us. The locked door, the latched windows, they suggest a puzzle. Yes, but not an unsolvable one. We must consider the habits of the victim, the routines of those around him. Miss Henshaw locked the door at 8. Monsieur Finch was here at 6. Lord Carver visited in the afternoon. Each had opportunity, but who had the means and the will?" Japp sighed, rubbing his temples. "You and your riddles, Poirot. I say we lean on Carver. He's got the money, the motive, and the nerve." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps. But the nerve, it is not enough. We need the truth, and the truth lies in the details, the cup of tea, the ink, the silence of this studio. Let us proceed with method, Inspector. The gray cells, they are already at work." As they stepped back into the pale light of Marwood, Poirot's mind was a tapestry of questions. The three suspects, each so different, yet each bound to Varnum by ties of ambition, admiration, or commerce. The ebony scroll, a phantom of beauty and value, had vanished into the night, leaving a dead man in its wake. Poirot knew that the answer lay not only in what had been said, but in what had been left unsaid. The glances, the hesitations, the truths hidden behind polite words. The game, as he so often called it, was well and truly afoot. Chapter 3. The Locked Door. The late morning light filtered weakly through the clouds, casting a pallid glow over St. Alden's Lane. Hercule Poirot stood once more before the ivy-clad studio of Edmund Varnum, his small, neat figure a stark contrast to the somber scene. The village of Marwood hummed quietly around him, its inhabitants casting furtive glances toward the boarded window and the constable stationed at the door. Inspector Japp, ever the man of action, was already inside, directing a young sergeant to catalogue the studio's contents. Poirot, however, lingered outside, his green eyes tracing the lines of the building as though it were a map to the killer's mind. "Mon ami," Poirot called softly as he entered, his cane tapping a precise rhythm on the threshold. "You are busy, I see, but the truth, it does not always lie in the objects we collect. It hides in the spaces between." Japp looked up from a ledger, his brow furrowed. "Spaces between? Poirot, you'll drive me mad with your riddles. We've got a dead man, a missing scroll, and a room locked tighter than a bank vault. No forced entry, no broken locks. How did the blighter get in and out?" Poirot's mustache curved slightly, a sign of his mind at work. "That, Inspector, is the heart of our puzzle. A locked room is not merely a barrier, it is a statement. The killer wishes us to believe the impossible, but Hercule Poirot does not believe in the impossible, only in the clever." The studio was as they had left it, a shrine to precision, with Varnum's desk bearing its silent witnesses, ink bottles, quills, and the half-finished parchment that was not the ebony scroll. The teacup, now removed for analysis, had left a faint ring on the polished wood, a ghostly reminder of the poison that had ended the calligrapher's life. The air was heavy, not just with the scent of ink and vellum, but with the weight of a crime unresolved. Poirot approached the oak door, its surface unmarred by scratches or dents. The bolt, a heavy iron affair, was still drawn, as Miss Henshaw had found it that morning. He ran a gloved finger along its edge, his touch delicate, almost reverent. "This bolt," he said, "it was engaged when the body was discovered, yes?" Jap nodded, joining him. "Solid as a rock. Miss Henshaw swore she locked it herself last night at 8, and the key was on the desk, right where Varnum always kept it. She had to smash the window to get in." Poirot's eyes flicked to the boarded window, one of 4 set high in the walls, their leaded panes too small for a man to pass through. He climbed a short step-ladder, provided by the constable, and examined each latch in turn. All were secure, their mechanisms stiff with age but intact. "No tampering," he murmured. "The windows, they are as innocent as they appear." Jap threw up his hands. "Then how, Poirot?" "The scroll's gone, Varnum's dead, and no one could have walked out with the door bolted and the windows latched. Unless you think the killer's a ghost." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A ghost? None. But a mind, a clever mind, can create the illusion of the impossible. Let us consider the room itself. The walls, the floor, the very air. They hold secrets if we know where to look." He began a meticulous circuit of the studio, his cane tapping lightly as he moved. The walls were paneled in dark wood, polished to a soft sheen, and adorned with shelves of manuscripts and tools. Poirot paused before each panel, pressing gently, listening for any telltale sound. Jap watched, half impatient, half curious, as Poirot's gloved hands explored the woodwork with the precision of a surgeon. Near the back of the room, behind a heavy bookshelf laden with rolls of vellum, Poirot stopped. He leaned closer, his ear almost touching the panel, and tapped it with the silver head of his cane. A faint, hollow echo answered. His eyes gleamed, and with a gentle push, the panel gave way, swinging inward on silent hinges to reveal a narrow passage, barely wide enough for a man to pass through. "Voila!" Poirot exclaimed, his voice tinged with triumph. "The locked room. It is no longer locked." Jap's jaw dropped as he peered into the passage, its walls rough and damp, leading to a small door that opened onto the studio's rear garden. "Good Lord, Poirot! A secret passage? How did you know?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "I did not know, mon ami. I suspected. A room so carefully locked suggests a purpose, and a purpose suggests a plan. This passage, it was known to someone who used it to enter, to kill, and to escape with the ebony scroll." Jap stepped into the passage, his lantern casting long shadows. The floor was packed earth, scuffed but showing no clear footprints. The garden door, concealed by ivy, was unlatched but bore no signs of recent forcing. "This changes everything," Jap said, his voice echoing slightly. "But who knew about this?" "Varnum, obviously, but who else?" Poirot emerged into the garden, his shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. The area was secluded, screened by high hedges, invisible from the street. "That, Inspector, is the question. We must return to our suspects. Lord Carver, Miss Henshaw, Monsieur Finch. One of them, or perhaps more, knew of this passage, and one of them used it." Jap scratched his chin, his eyes narrowing. "Carver's got the means. Money to buy secrets, maybe even poison. Henshaw was here last, locking up. And Finch, well, he's shifty, always rubbing his hands like he's got something to hide." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Each has opportunity, yes, but opportunity is not enough. We must seek the motive, the desire that burns so fiercely it leads to murder. The ebony scroll, it is the key. Why take it? For its value, its beauty, or something more?" He returned to the studio, his gaze falling once more on the desk. The absence of the scroll was a wound in the room's order, a void that spoke of intent. He picked up the key, its weight solid in his hand, and turned it over, examining its worn surface. "This key," he said softly. It remained on the desk. Why? If the killer used the passage, why not take the key to complete the illusion of a locked room? Japp shrugged. Maybe they didn't think of it. Or they were in a hurry. Poirot shook his head. "Non, Inspector. A killer who plans a secret passage does not overlook such details. The key was left deliberately to mislead us, or to point us to the truth." He moved to the bookshelf, examining the rolls of vellum. One, slightly askew, caught his eye. He unrolled it carefully, revealing a practice sheet, its script similar to Varnum's but less assured. Clara Henshaw's work, perhaps. "The apprentice," he murmured. "She learned from the master, but did she learn his secrets?" Japp followed his gaze. "You think Clara's involved?" "She's a slip of a girl, Poirot, hardly the murdering type." Poirot's smile was faint. "The heart, mon ami, it can surprise us. A girl may love her mentor, but love can turn to envy, to resentment. Or perhaps loyalty drove her to protect something, or someone." He replaced the vellum and turned to the passage entrance, now propped open by the constable. "This passage," he said, "it is old, perhaps as old as the building. Varnum, a man of secrets, would have known it. But who else? A collector, seeking a prize? A student, trusted with the studio's intimacies? A merchant, familiar with its comings and goings?" Japp sighed, his patience thinning. "You're spinning webs, Poirot. We need facts, not theories." "Facts," Poirot said, his voice sharp, "are the foundation. But it is the mind, the gray cells, that build the truth. We shall question our suspects again, Inspector, but with new eyes. The passage changes everything." As they stepped back into the garden, the wind stirred, rustling the ivy that concealed the door. Poirot paused, his eyes scanning the ground. A single leaf, crushed and slightly muddy, lay near the entrance. He bent to pick it up, his movements precise, and held it to the light. "A small thing," he said, "but even the smallest thing speaks. Someone passed here recently. Perhaps last night Japp took the leaf, frowning. Could be anyone, Varnum himself even." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. "But we shall see. The truth, it is like a mosaic. Each piece, no matter how small, fits into the whole." They returned to the street, where the constable stood guard, his face pale in the gray light. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities, each suspect a thread in the tapestry of the crime. The locked door, once a barrier, was now a gateway to the killer's intent. The ebony scroll, a phantom of beauty and greed, had drawn blood, and Poirot knew that its trail would lead him to the heart of the mystery. "Let us prepare, Inspector," he said, his voice steady. "The passage is a secret revealed, but secrets remain. We shall uncover them, one by one, until the truth stands clear." As they walked back toward the Rose and Crown, the village seemed to close in around them, its quiet lanes hiding the answers Poirot sought. The game, as he so often called it, had grown more intricate, and he relished the challenge. Chapter 4. The Collector's Ambition. The afternoon sky over Marwood hung heavy with the threat of rain, its somber gray casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Carver Hall. The manor, a sprawling edifice of weathered stone and tall chimneys, stood at the edge of the village, its grandeur a testament to Lord Reginald Carver's wealth and his passion for acquisition. Hercule Poirot, seated in a velvet-upholstered armchair in the manor's library, sipped a cup of tisane, his keen eyes fixed on his host. Inspector Japp, less at ease, stood by a towering window, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the wind stir the ancient oaks outside. The library was a shrine to Carver's obsession. Oak shelves stretched to the vaulted ceiling, groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes, illuminated manuscripts, and glass cases displaying scrolls of vellum and papyrus. Each artifact was meticulously labeled, their origins spanning centuries and continents. A faint scent of old paper and wax polish permeated the air, mingling with the sharp tang of a fire crackling in the massive hearth. Lord Carver sat opposite Poirot, his posture rigid, his thin lips pressed into a line. His tailored suit was immaculate, but his fingers betrayed a restless energy, tapping lightly on the arm of his chair. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice cool and measured, "I trust you have a purpose for this visit. I've already told Inspector Japp all I know about poor Varnum's death." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his mind at work. "Indeed, my lord, but the truth, it is like a fine manuscript. It reveals itself only under close scrutiny. You are a man of discernment, a collector of rare treasures. This ebony scroll, it held a particular allure for you. None?" Carver's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Naturally. Varnum's work was unparalleled. The ebony scroll was to be his crowning achievement, black parchment, gold ink, a technique lost since the days of Byzantine scribes. I saw it once, half-finished, and it was exquisite. I offered him a substantial sum, but he was stubborn, said it was for a private buyer, some foreign chap." Poirot tilted his head, his expression bland, but his gaze piercing. "A substantial sum, you say, and yet you did not acquire it. For a man such as yourself, accustomed to possessing what you desire, such a refusal must have been vexing?" Carver's jaw tightened, his fingers stilling on the chair. "I'm not accustomed to being refused, it's true. But I respected Varnum's craft. I didn't press him beyond reason." Poirot sipped his tisane, his movements deliberate. "Respect, it is admirable. Yet the scroll is missing, and Varnum is dead. Tell me, my lord, when did you last visit the studio?" "Yesterday afternoon," Carver replied, his tone clipped. "Around 3 o'clock. I wanted to discuss another commission, but Varnum was preoccupied with the scroll. We spoke briefly, and I left." "And you saw nothing unusual?" Poirot pressed. "No visitors? No signs of distress?" Carver shook his head. "Nothing. He was at his desk, as always, surrounded by his inks and quills. I didn't stay long." Poirot's eyes drifted to a glass case nearby, where a scroll of yellowed vellum lay under soft lighting. "Your collection, it is remarkable. You have a passion for the written word, yes, but also for its value. The ebony scroll. It was not merely art to you, I think." Carver leaned forward, his voice low. "I'll not deny its value, Monsieur Poirot. A piece like that could fetch thousands at auction, perhaps more, given its rarity. But I'm no thief, and certainly no murderer." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Of course, my lord. Yet value tempts, does it not? And temptation can lead to desperate acts." Japp, who had been silent, cleared his throat. "What about this secret passage we found, Lord Carver? Know anything about that?" Carver's eyes flicked to Japp, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Passage?" "I know nothing of any passage." Poirot watched him closely, noting the slight tightening of his lips. "Curious, no? A man so familiar with Varnum's studio, yet unaware of its hidden ways. Tell me, my lord, did Varnum ever speak of his studio's history? Old buildings, they have secrets." Carver hesitated, then shook his head. He mentioned it was old, built in the 17th century, I believe. But nothing about passages. If there's one, it's news to me. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. He rose, his movements precise, and approached the glass case, peering at the scroll within. "This piece," he said, "it is from Varnum's hand?" Carver joined him, his tone warming slightly. "Yes, an early work, a genealogical chart for a local family, done in his meticulous style. I acquired it years ago." Poirot's fingers brushed the air above the glass, as though tracing the script. Exquisite. And yet, the ebony scroll was to surpass even this. A pity it is lost. Carver's eyes darkened. "A tragedy, Monsieur Poirot, for art and for Varnum." They returned to their seats, and Poirot sipped his tisane, his mind cataloguing every word, every gesture. Carver's composure was formidable, but Poirot sensed a crack beneath the surface, a hunger, perhaps, that went beyond mere appreciation. "One final question, milord," he said. "This private buyer for the scroll. Did Varnum ever mention a name, a detail?" Carver shook his head, his voice firm. "No, he was cagey about it. Said it was confidential, even to me." Poirot rose, smoothing his coat. "Merci, Lord Carver. You have been most helpful. We shall speak again, I think." As they left the library, Japp muttered, "He's a cool customer, that one. Didn't bat an eye at the passage business, but I'd wager he's hiding something." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, mon ami. But what he hides, it is not yet clear. A collector's ambition can be a dangerous thing, but we must also consider the others. The apprentice, the merchant, they too have their desires." They stepped into the manor's entrance hall, where a butler materialized to show them out. The air outside was colder now, the first drops of rain speckling the gravel drive. Poirot paused under the portico, his gaze distant. "The scroll," he said softly. "It is not merely a prize. It is a symbol of power, of mastery, of secrets. We must learn why it was worth killing," for Japp adjusted his hat against the drizzle. "You think Carver's our man?" Poirot's smile was faint. "I think, Inspector, that Lord Carver knows more than he says. But whether he is the killer or merely a piece in the puzzle, that we shall discover. Let us return to the village. The studio, the suspects, they await us." As they descended the drive, the manor loomed behind them, its windows like eyes watching their departure. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities, each suspect a shadow in the intricate dance of motive and opportunity. The ebony scroll, a phantom of beauty and greed, had drawn blood, and its trail was leading him deeper into the heart of Marwood's secrets. Chapter 5. The Student's Secret. The rain had begun to fall in earnest over Marwood, a soft patter that turned the cobblestones of Saint. Alden's Lane, slick and gleaming. Hercule Poirot, shielded by a black umbrella, walked with his usual measured pace toward the modest cottage where Clara Henshaw lived. Inspector Japp, less fastidious, hunched his shoulders against the drizzle, his coat already damp. The village was hushed, the gray light lending an air of melancholy to the narrow streets, as though Marwood itself mourned the loss of its calligrapher. Poirot's mind was alert, his gray cells sorting through the threads of the mystery. The discovery of the secret passage had shifted the puzzle, revealing a method where none had seemed possible. Yet, the why, the motive behind Edmund Varnum's death and the theft of the ebony scroll, remained elusive. Clara Henshaw, the young apprentice who had found her mentor's body, was the next piece to examine. Her tears at the Rose and Crown had been genuine, Poirot thought, but genuine tears could mask deeper truths. The cottage was a small, ivy-covered dwelling, its garden tidy but unremarkable, with a single rose bush struggling against the autumn chill. Clara opened the door at Jap's knock, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed, as though she had not slept since the morning's grim discovery. She wore a plain gray dress, her ink-stained fingers clutching a crumpled handkerchief. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, come in. I expected you might come." The sitting room was cramped but neat, with a small fireplace casting a feeble warmth. A desk in the corner was cluttered with sheets of parchment, quills, and bottles of ink, a mirror of Varnum's studio in miniature. Clara gestured to two worn armchairs, her movements hesitant, and sat on a stool, her hands twisting in her lap. Poirot settled into a chair, his umbrella propped carefully against the wall. "Mademoiselle Henshaw," he began, his tone gentle but probing. "You have suffered a great shock, finding your mentor dead. Yet I must ask you to revisit that moment, to help us understand. You were the last to see Monsieur Varnum alive, yes?" Clara nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Yes, last night, at 8 o'clock. I was helping him mix inks for the Ebony Scroll. He was particular about his work. He stayed late often, so I locked the door when I left, as he always asked me to." Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, noted the tremor in her hands. "And the scroll itself, you saw it on his desk?" "Yes," she said, her voice catching. "It was beautiful, Monsieur Poirot. Black as night, with gold lettering that seemed to glow. He was working on it when I left, adding the final strokes. I touched it once, earlier that day. He was cross with me, said it was too delicate for careless hands." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "A scolding, mademoiselle. It can wound, especially from one so admired. You respected Monsieur Varnum greatly, did you not?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she pressed the handkerchief to her lips. "He was like a father to me. He saw something in me, taught me his craft when no one else would. I owe him everything." Jap, standing by the fireplace, cleared his throat. "Miss Henshaw, you broke the window to get into the studio this morning. You're sure the door was bolted?" "Yes," she said quickly. "I tried the key, but it wouldn't turn. The bolt was drawn, just as I'd left it. I called out, but there was no answer. I knew something was wrong." Poirot's gaze drifted to the desk, where a sheet of parchment lay half-covered with practice script. The strokes were careful, almost identical to Varnum's, but lacked the effortless grace of the master's hand. "Your work, mademoiselle?" he asked, rising to examine it. Clara flushed, her hands twisting tighter. "Yes, I practice every day, trying to match his skill. I'll never be as good, but I try." Poirot unrolled the parchment, his gloved fingers tracing the lines. "Admirable dedication," he said softly. "To emulate a master is no small thing, yet such devotion, it can breed other feelings, none? Admiration, yes, but also envy, perhaps." Clara's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Envy? No, Monsieur Poirot, never. I loved working with him. I'd never harm him." Poirot's expression remained gentle, but his eyes were unrelenting. "Of course, mademoiselle. But let us speak of the studio. You were there daily. You knew its rhythms. Did you ever notice anything unusual? A visitor, perhaps, or a secret kept by Monsieur Varnum?" She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the desk. "He was private about his work, especially the Ebony Scroll. He didn't tell me who it was for, only that it was a special commission. But She paused, biting her lip. But? Poirot prompted, leaning forward. Lord Carver came often, she said reluctantly. He was always asking about the scroll, offering money for it. Mr. Varnum didn't like it. He said Carver was too greedy, that he cared more for owning things than understanding them. Poirot's eyebrows rose. A perceptive observation. And what of Monsieur Finch, the merchant? Clara shrugged, her voice steadier. He came and went, delivering supplies. He was friendly, always chatting, but Mr. Varnum didn't trust him much. Said he was too curious about the studio's business, Japp interjected, his tone sharp. What about this secret passage we found? Ever hear Varnum mention it? Clara's eyes widened, genuine surprise crossing her face. A passage? No, never. He never spoke of anything like that. The studio was his sanctuary. He kept it locked to protect his work. Poirot watched her closely, noting the quickness of her response, the faint flush in her cheeks. A sanctuary, yes, but one with secrets. Tell me, mademoiselle, did you ever see anything in the studio that seemed out of place? A tool? A paper? Anything unusual? She shook her head, then paused, her brow furrowing. There was one thing, a few days ago. I found a small vial on the floor, near the bookshelf. It was empty, smelled sharp, like chemicals. I thought it was one of Mr. Varnum's inks, but he said it wasn't his and told me to throw it away. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A vial, you say? And you disposed of it? Yes, she said, her voice small. I didn't think it was important. Japp grunted, his frustration evident. Could have been evidence, Miss Henshaw? You should have kept it. Poirot raised a hand, his tone soothing. Do not distress yourself, mademoiselle. You acted as you thought best, but this vial, it is interesting, non? A clue, perhaps, to the poison that ended your mentor's life. Clara's hands trembled, and she looked away, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't bear to think of it. Who would do such a thing? He was so kind, so brilliant. Poirot rose, his movements precise, and approached the desk. He lifted a quill, examining its worn tip, then set it down with care. Kindness, brilliance, these are qualities that inspire devotion, but also desire. The ebony scroll. It was a creation of beauty, yes, but also of power. Someone wanted it enough to kill. He turned to Clara, his voice soft but firm. You have been most helpful, mademoiselle. Rest now, but be prepared. We may speak again. As they stepped back into the rain, Japp pulled his coat tighter, his expression grim. She's hiding something, Poirot. That vial business sounds suspicious. And she was the last one with Varnum. Poirot nodded, his umbrella shielding him from the downpour. Perhaps, mon ami. But her grief, it is real. The question is, what lies beneath it? Envy, loyalty, or something else? The vial she mentioned, it suggests planning, a poison prepared in advance. We must learn more of this. Japp sighed, his breath misting in the cold air. You think she's innocent, then? I think, Poirot said, his eyes distant, that innocence is a fragile thing, easily masked by tears or ambition. Clara Henshaw loved her mentor, but love can twist into darker forms. We must watch her as we watch the others. The rain fell harder as they made their way back to the Rose and Crown, the village closing in around them like a secret kept too long. Poirot's mind was a whirl of possibilities, each suspect a facet of the mystery. Clara's ink-stained fingers, her trembling voice, her mention of the vial. They were pieces of a puzzle that grew more intricate with each step. The ebony scroll, a phantom of art and greed, had claimed a life, and Poirot knew that its shadow would lead him to the truth. Chapter 6. The Merchant's Tale. The rain had softened to a fine mist by the time Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp reached the heart of Marwood, where the narrow streets converged on a small square lined with shops. The sign above Tobias Finch's establishment, Finch's Fine Papers and Inks, swung gently in the damp breeze, its gilt lettering faded but proud. The shop's windows displayed rolls of creamy vellum, bottles of ink in jewel-like hues, and quills arranged with an almost artistic care. Poirot paused to admire the display, his gloved fingers adjusting the brim of his hat as he considered the man they had come to see. "Finch seems a nervous sort," Japp remarked, pushing open the door, which chimed softly. "Always fidgeting, like he's got a secret itching to get out." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Nervousness, mon ami, is often the shadow of knowledge. Let us see what Monsieur Finch reveals, and what he conceals." Inside, the shop was a haven of order, its shelves stacked with neatly labeled boxes and glass cases protecting rare papers. The air carried the sharp, pleasant scent of ink and the faint musk of aged parchment. Tobias Finch stood behind a counter, polishing a brass scale with a cloth, his round face flushed and his balding head gleaming under the gaslight. His hands, broad and calloused, moved with a restless energy, and his eyes darted to the door as Poirot and Japp entered. "Gentlemen," Finch said, his voice overly hearty, "welcome to my humble shop. I suppose you're here about poor Varnum? Terrible business, just terrible." Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes sharp. "Indeed, Monsieur Finch. The death of a man like Edmund Varnum is a loss to us all. You were one of the last to see him alive. I understand. Perhaps you can enlighten us." Finch set down the cloth, his hands rubbing together as though seeking comfort. "Happy to help, Monsieur Poirot, Inspector. I was at the studio yesterday afternoon, around 5, delivering a batch of special ink for the Ebony Scroll. Gold-flecked, imported from Florence. Costly stuff, but Varnum insisted on the best." Poirot moved closer to the counter, his cane tapping lightly on the polished floor. "This ink, it was for the scroll alone? You saw it, perhaps?" Finch nodded, his eyes flickering with unease. "Just a glimpse?" "Varnum was working on it when I arrived. Black parchment, gold lettering, like something out of a fairy tale. He didn't let me linger, mind you. Said he was busy and sent me on my way. Japp, standing near a display of quills, crossed his arms. You left by 6, you said? Anyone else there? Miss Henshaw, maybe? Or Lord Carver? Finch shook his head, his fingers twisting the cloth, now abandoned on the counter. No one, Inspector. Just Varnum, hunched over his desk as usual. I dropped off the ink. We chatted a bit, about the weather mostly, and I left. The door was still unlocked then. Miss Henshaw locks up later, I reckon. Poirot's gaze drifted to a shelf behind Finch, where a row of ink bottles stood like sentinels. One, a small vial with a dark, shimmering liquid, caught his eye. This ink, he said, pointing with his cane, it is the same as you delivered to Monsieur Varnum? Finch turned, his movements jerky. That's the one. Gold-flecked, like I said. Takes weeks to get from Italy, and it's not cheap. Varnum ordered it special for the scroll. Poirot leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as he studied the vial. A merchant such as yourself, monsieur, you know the value of such things. The Ebony Scroll, it was not merely a work of art, but a treasure. Did you ever consider its worth? Finch's flush deepened, and he laughed, a nervous, barking sound. Me? I'm just a supplier, Monsieur Poirot. I sell ink and paper, not dreams. Sure, I knew the scroll was valuable. Varnum didn't let just anyone near it, but I had no business with it beyond delivering what he needed. Poirot's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. Yet a merchant, he is a man of commerce, non? He sees value where others see only beauty. Tell me, Monsieur Finch, did you ever speak with Lord Carver about the scroll? Finch's hands stilled, his eyes darting to Japp, then back to Poirot. Carver? Well, yes, now and then. He's a customer, you know, buys parchment for his collection, sometimes asks about Varnum's supplies. He was keen on the scroll, always pestering Varnum to sell it. But that's no secret. Japp stepped forward, his tone sharp. What about this secret passage in the studio? You deliver there regular. Ever notice anything odd? Maybe a door or panel that didn't belong? Finch's eyes widened, genuine surprise flashing across his face. A passage? No, sir, nothing like that. I was in and out, sticking to the front door. Varnum was particular about his space, didn't like me poking around. Poirot watched him closely, noting the quickness of his denial, the way his hands resumed their restless rubbing. You are a man who observes, Monsieur Finch. You see the comings and goings of the studio. Did you ever notice anything unusual? Visitors, perhaps, or items out of place? Finch hesitated, his brow furrowing. Well, there was one thing, a week or so back. I was early with a delivery, and I saw a man leaving the studio, tall, foreign-looking, with a dark coat and a scarf over his face. Didn't get a good look, but Varnum seemed agitated after. Said it was a private matter. Poirot's eyebrows rose, his interest piqued. A foreign gentleman, you say? And Varnum, he did not explain? No, Finch said, shaking his head. He brushed it off, said it was nothing. I didn't press him. He wasn't the sort to share. Japp scribbled in his notebook, his expression grim. Sounds like our mystery buyer, maybe. You didn't hear a name, did you? Finch shook his head again, his hands now gripping the counter's edge. No, Inspector. I kept out of it. My job's to deliver, not to pry. Poirot moved to a glass case, where a set of quills lay on velvet, their tips stained with use. Your job, yes, but curiosity. It is a human trait, no? You supplied the tools for a masterpiece. Did you never wonder about its purpose, its destination? Finch's laugh was strained. Wondering's one thing, Monsieur Poirot. Doing something about it's another. I liked Varnum, respected him. I'd never do him harm. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, though his tone remained gentle. Of course, monsieur. But harm comes in many forms, and greed, it is a powerful force. The ebony scroll, it tempted many, I think. He turned to Japp, his voice low. We have learned much, Inspector, but there is more to uncover. Monsieur Finch, he is nervous, yes, but is it guilt or merely fear? They thanked Finch and stepped back into the misty square, the shop's chime echoing behind them. Japp pulled his coat tighter, his face set in a scowl. He's slippery, that one. Knows more than he's letting on, I'd wager. That foreign chap he mentioned could be a lead. Poirot nodded, his eyes distant as he watched the mist curl around the lampposts. Perhaps, mon ami. But the foreign visitor, he is a shadow, while our suspects are flesh and blood. Finch's tale, it is plausible, yet it lacks depth. He sees, he observes, but he does not tell all. The ink, the stranger, the studio's rhythms, these are pieces of our mosaic. Japp grunted, his patience wearing thin. You're saying he's not our man? I am saying, Poirot replied, his voice steady, that we must consider all possibilities. Finch is a merchant, a man of profit. The scroll's value would not escape him. But is he a killer? That we shall see. As they walked back toward St. Alden's Lane, the mist thickened, cloaking Marwood in a veil of secrets. Poirot's mind was a whirl of threads. Carver's ambition, Clara's devotion, Finch's nervousness, all woven around the absent ebony scroll. Each suspect held a piece of the truth, and Poirot knew that the next step would bring him closer to unraveling the mystery. The rain might hide the village's face, but it could not obscure the path to justice. Chapter 7. The Poisoned Cup. The drizzle had ceased, leaving Marwood's streets glistening under a sky that promised no reprieve from its oppressive gray. Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp stood once more in the quiet sanctuary of Edmund Varnum's studio, the air within still heavy with the scent of ink and the lingering shadow of death. The constable at the door had been replaced by a fresh-faced lad, who nodded stiffly as the two men entered. The studio's order remained untouched, save for the absence of the teacup, now in the hands of the local doctor for analysis. Poirot's eyes, sharp and restless, scanned the room, as though the walls themselves might yield the secret of the crime. Japp, his hands thrust into his coat pockets, paced near the desk. "The doctor sent word just before we arrived, Poirot. It's as we thought. Cyanide in the tea, quick-acting, deadly in minutes. Varnum drank it, slumped over, and that was that." Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze settling on the faint ring left by the teacup on the polished oak desk. "Cyanide," he murmured, "a poison of precision. No struggle, no mess, only silence. The killer, he is clever, Inspector, to choose such a method. But the tea, how was it poisoned, and by whom?" Japp shrugged, his frustration evident. "That's the rub. Clara Henshaw made the tea. She admitted as much at the inn. Said she brewed a pot around 7, left it on the desk for Varnum before locking up at 8. But Finch was there earlier, and Carver visited in the afternoon. Any of them could have slipped something into the pot, or the cup itself." Poirot moved to the desk, his gloved fingers hovering over the ring as though tracing the ghost of the cup. "The cup was untouched, you say, except for the poison. No spills, no signs of force. This suggests the poison was added after the tea was poured. None? A deliberate act, requiring access and opportunity." He turned to the small side table, where a teapot and a single saucer remained. The pot, simple but elegant, bore no marks of tampering, its spout clean and its lid firmly in place. Poirot lifted the lid, peering inside, then replaced it with care. The tea was brewed by Mademoiselle Henshaw, but the poison, it could have been introduced later, by one who knew Varnum's habits. Japp nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Clara's the obvious one. She was here last. But she's a nervous wreck, doesn't strike me as the poisoning type. Finch, now, he's jumpy enough to be hiding something. And Carver's got the means. Cyanide's not hard to come by for a man with his connections." Poirot's smile was faint, his mind already weaving through the possibilities. Connections? Yes, but let us not forget motive. The ebony scroll, it is the heart of this crime. To poison a man and steal his work requires not only opportunity but desire, a desire so fierce it leads to murder. He moved to the secret passage, its panel still propped open by the constable's wedge. The narrow corridor, damp and shadowed, stretched toward the garden, its walls rough and unyielding. Poirot stepped inside, his cane tapping the packed earth floor, his eyes searching for any trace of the killer's passage. A faint scuff mark, barely visible, caught his attention near the garden door. He bent to examine it, his movements precise, and noted a trace of mud, still damp from the previous night's rain. "Interesting," he murmured, straightening. "Someone passed through here recently, perhaps after the rain began. The killer, he used this passage to escape, but also to enter, I think." Jap joined him, his lantern casting a flickering light. "So they came in, poisoned the tea, took the scroll, and slipped out, all without Varnum noticing?" "That's a tall order, Poirot." "Not so tall, mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice soft but firm. Varnum was absorbed in his work, as artists often are. A quiet step, a moment's distraction, and the poison is in the cup. The passage, it makes this possible. He returned to the studio, his gaze falling on the bookshelf where Clara had mentioned finding an empty vial. He ran a gloved finger along the edge, finding nothing but dust, but his mind lingered on her words. "The vial Mademoiselle Henshaw found," he said. "It smelled of chemicals," she said. "Cyanide has a distinctive odor, like bitter almonds. Could it be our poison?" Jap scratched his chin, his expression grim. "Could be. But she threw it out, so we've no way to know. Sounds convenient if you ask me, like she's covering her tracks." Poirot shook his head, his eyes distant. "Or perhaps she is a victim of her own innocence. A vial discarded, a passage unknown. These are threads we must follow. Let us consider the suspect's movements. Lord Carver visited at 3, Monsieur Finch at 5, and Mademoiselle Henshaw was here until 8. The tea was brewed at 7, the door bolted at 8. The poison, it was added in that narrow window." Jap frowned, his notebook open in his hand. "So the killer either slipped in after Clara left, using the passage, or poisoned the tea while she was still here. That points to her, doesn't it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It points to opportunity, Inspector, but not yet to guilt. Clara brewed the tea, but Finch and Carver had access earlier. And this foreign visitor Finch mentioned, perhaps he too played a role. We must learn more of him." He moved to the desk, examining the half-finished parchment Varnum had left behind. The script, though beautiful, was not the ebony scroll, and its presence suggested Varnum had been working on something else before his death. Poirot's fingers traced the strokes, his mind turning. "Varnum was a man of routine," he said. "He drank his tea each evening, yes?" A habit known to those close to him, Jap nodded. "Clara said it was his custom, tea at 7, to keep him going through the night's work. Everyone knew it, I reckon. Carver, Finch, even the villagers." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice sharp. "A habit is a vulnerability. The killer used it, planned for it. The poison was not a random act, but a calculated one. He stepped back, his gaze sweeping the room once more. The studio, with its meticulous order, seemed to mock the chaos of the crime. The secret passage, the poisoned cup, the missing scroll. All were pieces of a puzzle that grew more intricate with each revelation. Poirot's mind, however, was undaunted, arranging the facts with the precision of a master calligrapher. "We must return to our suspects, Inspector," he said, his tone resolute. Each had the means to know Varnum's habits, each had access to the studio. But only one had the will to kill. "We shall find them, mon ami, by following the trail of the scroll." Jap sighed, his shoulders slumping. "You make it sound simple, Poirot, but I'm betting it's anything but. Poison's a coward's weapon, though. Makes me think of someone sneaky, like Finch. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Cowardly, perhaps, but also clever. The poison, the passage, the theft, they speak of a mind that plans, that deceives. We shall uncover this mind, Inspector, with method and order. As they left the studio, the constable locking the door behind them, the village seemed to close in, its quiet streets hiding the truth Poirot sought. The rain had left a chill in the air, but Poirot's resolve burned bright. The poisoned cup was a silent witness, and its story, combined with the secret passage, pointed to a killer who thought themselves untouchable. But Hercule Poirot was not so easily fooled, and the ebony scroll's shadow would lead him to justice. Chapter 8. The Hidden Motive. The late afternoon light filtered through the leaded windows of the Rose and Crown's private parlor, casting a lattice of shadows across the oak table where Hercule Poirot sat, his hands folded neatly before him. The room, with its low beams and faded tapestries, was a fitting stage for the gathering he had orchestrated. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his arms crossed, his face a mixture of skepticism and anticipation. The three suspects, Lord Reginald Carver, Clara Henshaw, and Tobias Finch, sat at the table, their expressions ranging from guarded to anxious, each aware that Poirot's summons carried the weight of scrutiny. The parlor was warm, the fire in the hearth crackling softly, yet the air held a chill of tension. Poirot's green eyes moved from one suspect to another, his mustache perfectly still, a sign of the intense focus within. He had chosen this moment to confront them together, to observe not only their words, but the interplay of their glances, the subtle shifts in posture that might betray the truth. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and precise, "we are gathered to discuss a crime most heinous, the murder of Edmund Varnum and the theft of his masterpiece, the Ebony Scroll. Each of you had a connection to the victim, a reason to be in his studio. Each of you, perhaps, had a motive to take his life and his work." Lord Carver's thin lips tightened, his cold blue eyes narrowing. "This is preposterous, Monsieur Poirot. I am a collector, not a criminal. I had no reason to harm Varnum." Clara Henshaw, her ink-stained fingers clutching a handkerchief, looked up with tearful eyes. "I loved Mr. Varnum. He was my teacher, my mentor. I'd never do such a thing." Tobias Finch, his round face flushed, rubbed his hands together nervously. "I'm just a merchant, sir. I supplied his inks, nothing more. Why would I kill him?" Poirot raised a hand, his gesture commanding silence. "Protestations, they are expected, but let us speak of facts. The studio was locked, the windows latched, yet a secret passage was found, a passage that allowed the killer to enter, to poison Monsieur Varnum's tea with cyanide, and to escape with the Ebony Scroll. This passage, it changes the puzzle, non?" The suspects exchanged glances, each betraying a flicker of unease. Carver's jaw clenched, Clara's hands trembled, and Finch's eyes darted to the door as though longing to flee. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "The Ebony Scroll is not merely a work of art. It is a key to wealth, to prestige, perhaps to secrets we do not yet understand. Lord Carver, you desired it for your collection, a jewel to crown your treasures. Mademoiselle Henshaw, you admired your mentor's skill, perhaps envied it, and knew his studio's every corner. Monsieur Finch, you saw the scroll's value, a profit to tempt any merchant, but only one of you used the passage, poisoned the tea, and took the scroll." Carver leaned back, his voice icy. "You have no proof, Poirot." "I visited Varnum that afternoon, yes, but I left him alive. I knew nothing of any passage. Clara's voice was a whisper, barely audible. I locked the door at 8, as always. I didn't know about a passage. Mr. Varnum never told me." Finch's hands twisted together, his voice rising. "I was gone by 6. I never went near any passage. I'm no killer, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind cataloguing their reactions. "The passage. It is a secret, yes, but not unknown. I have learned that Monsieur Varnum once showed it to Lord Carver during a private viewing of his collection some years ago. Is this not so, my lord?" Carver's face paled, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. "That was ages ago, a passing comment about the studio's history. I'd forgotten it entirely." Poirot's smile was faint, almost predatory. "Forgotten, my lord? A man of your precision, who remembers the provenance of every manuscript in his collection? I find that unlikely. The passage, it offered a way to enter unseen, to poison the tea, to take the scroll, all while the door remained bolted." Clara gasped, her eyes wide. "Lord Carver? But why would he?" Carver's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "This is slander, Poirot. I admired Varnum's work, yes, but I didn't kill him. You've no evidence, only conjecture." Japp stepped forward, his tone gruff. "We've got more than conjecture, Lord Carver. Cyanide's not something you pick up at the chemist's. It takes connections, money, influence. You've got both." Carver's eyes flashed, but he held his composure. "I won't dignify that with a response, Inspector." Poirot turned to Clara, his voice softening. "Mademoiselle, you brewed the tea at 7, yes? You left it on the desk for Monsieur Varnum. Did you notice anything unusual? Perhaps a vial? A scent?" Clara shook her head, her tears falling freely now. "No, nothing. I made the tea, as always, left it for him. I didn't see any vial, not then." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Finch. "And you, monsieur, you delivered the ink at 5. You saw the scroll, you spoke with Varnum. Did you notice the teapot, perhaps, or a visitor lingering nearby?" Finch's flush deepened, his hands trembling. "No, sir. I was in and out, like I said. The teapot was there, but I didn't pay it mind. As for visitors, well, I told you about that foreign chap I saw last week. That's all I know." Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "The foreign visitor, yes, a shadow in our story. But let us focus on the present. The tea was poisoned, the scroll taken, the passage used. Each of you had opportunity, each had motive. Yet one detail troubles me. The key." He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "The key to the studio door was left on the desk, beside Varnum's body. Why? A killer who uses a secret passage to escape need not leave the key. It suggests a purpose, a misdirection, perhaps, or a clue to the killer's identity." Clara's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "I left the key there when I locked up. It's where Mr. Varnum always kept it." Carver's tone was sharp. "Anyone could have known that, Poirot. It proves nothing." Finch nodded vigorously. "Aye, it was no secret. Varnum was particular, but not about hiding his key." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Précisément. The key. It is a small thing, yet it speaks. The killer wished us to believe the room was impenetrable, yet the passage betrays them. And the cyanide, available to a man of means, like Lord Carver, or perhaps to a merchant with access to chemicals, like Monsieur Finch. Even an apprentice, Mademoiselle Henshaw, might find such a poison if driven by desperation." The room fell silent, the fire's crackle the only sound. The suspects' faces were a study in tension, Carver's cold defiance, Clara's tearful fear, Finch's nervous agitation. Poirot rose, his movements precise, his voice calm but commanding. "We are close, mes amis, to the truth, the ebony scroll. It is the heart of this crime, but its motive is hidden. Was it greed, envy, or something deeper? I, Hercule Poirot, will find it. You may go, but know this, your secrets, they cannot hide forever." As the suspects filed out, Carver's stride stiff, Clara's steps faltering, Finch's glance furtive, Japp turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. "You're pushing them, Poirot." "Think one'll crack?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "They are already cracking, mon ami. The passage, the key, the poison. These are pressures on their minds. One will falter, and when they do, we shall have our killer." They stepped into the evening, the air cool and sharp with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Marwood's streets were quiet, but Poirot felt the pulse of the mystery beating beneath the surface. The hidden motive, like the ebony scroll itself, was close, so close he could almost touch it. Chapter 9. The Trap. The twilight settled over Marwood like a velvet curtain, softening the edges of the village's gabled roofs and casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Hercule Poirot stood in the private parlor of the Rose and Crown, his small, neat figure silhouetted against the firelight. The room was quiet, save for the occasional crackle of the hearth and the distant murmur of villagers in the inn's tap-room. Inspector Japp paced near the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his face etched with the restless energy of a man awaiting a breakthrough. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity, his mind a whirl of calculations. The pieces of the puzzle, the poisoned tea, the secret passage, the missing ebony scroll, were falling into place, but the picture remained incomplete. To draw out the killer, he needed to unsettle them, to force a misstep. And so he had devised a trap, one that relied on the human heart's inability to resist temptation. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Japp, "the killer is clever, but not infallible. They believe they have outwitted us, with their passage and their poison. But we shall turn their confidence against them. Tonight we set a snare." Japp stopped pacing, his brow furrowed. "A snare? You're not suggesting we catch them red-handed, are you?" The scroll's gone. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Gone, perhaps, but not forgotten. I have let it be known through a discreet word to the village constable that the ebony scroll has been found, hidden in the studio, overlooked in our initial search. The news will reach our suspects, I am certain. The killer, driven by greed or fear, will return to claim it." Japp's eyes widened, a grudging admiration in his expression. "You're a sly one, Poirot. But how do you know they'll take the bait?" "Because," Poirot replied, his voice soft but certain, "the scroll is their obsession. For Lord Carver, it is a prize to crown his collection. For Mademoiselle Henshaw, it is a symbol of her mentor's genius, perhaps her own ambition. For Monsieur Finch, it is a fortune waiting to be claimed. One of them will come, Inspector, and we shall be waiting." Japp nodded, his skepticism giving way to resolve. "Right then. I'll have my men in the garden, watching the passage. If anyone tries to sneak in, we'll nab them." Poirot inclined his head. "Précisément. But we must be subtle, mon ami. The killer is cautious, like a fox. Station your men in the shadows, and let us watch from within the studio. The night, it will reveal what the day conceals. As dusk deepened into night, Poirot and Japp made their way to Varnum's studio, the village now cloaked in silence. The constable, briefed on the plan, had spread the rumor of the scroll's discovery with the guileless efficiency of a small-town gossip. The studio's boarded window and bolted door stood as sentinels, but the secret passage, its garden door concealed by ivy, was the true stage for the trap. Inside the studio, Poirot and Japp took up positions in the shadows, near the bookshelf that hid the passage's entrance. The room was dark, save for a single lantern casting a dim glow over the desk, where a rolled parchment, carefully chosen to resemble the ebony scroll, lay as bait. Poirot's eyes, accustomed to the gloom, scanned the panel, his ears attuned to the faintest sound. Japp, less patient, shifted beside him, his hand resting on the truncheon at his belt. "Think they'll come, Poirot?" Japp whispered, his voice barely audible. Poirot's reply was a murmur. "They will come, Inspector. The scroll, it calls to them, like a siren to a sailor. We need only wait." The minutes stretched into an hour, the silence broken only by the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of leaves outside. Poirot's focus never wavered, his mind replaying the suspects' words, their gestures, their secrets. Carver's icy ambition, Clara's tearful devotion, Finch's nervous evasion, each held a motive, but only one had acted. A faint creak broke the stillness, the sound of the garden door easing open. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane, and Japp tensed, his eyes fixed on the passage's entrance. A shadow moved within, cautious and deliberate, the soft scuff of boots on earth betraying their approach. The panel shifted, and a figure emerged into the studio, their silhouette tall and angular against the lantern's glow. It was Lord Carver. His face, usually composed, was taut with urgency as he moved toward the desk, his gloved hands reaching for the parchment. Before he could touch it, Japp sprang forward, his voice sharp. "Hold it right there, Lord Carver." Carver froze, his eyes darting to the shadows where Poirot stepped into the light. Two constables burst through the garden door, their lanterns illuminating the scene. Carver's hand dropped, his expression shifting from shock to defiance, but Poirot noted a satchel clutched under his arm, its leather worn but sturdy. "Milord," Poirot said, his voice calm but piercing, "you have come for the scroll, I see. But it is not the scroll you seek, merely a decoy. The true ebony scroll. It remains lost. Or does it?" Carver's lips curled into a sneer, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "This is absurd, Poirot. I heard the scroll was found. I came to verify it, nothing more. I've done nothing wrong." Japp signaled to the constables, who seized the satchel. Inside, they found a small vial, its contents clear but ominous, and a forged letter bearing Varnum's signature, claiming he had sold the scroll to Carver. Japp's face darkened as he read it aloud. "This doesn't look good, Lord Carver. Cyanide and a fake document? Care to explain?" Carver's composure cracked, his voice rising. "I didn't kill him. I wanted the scroll, yes, but I didn't poison Varnum. That vial, it's for cleaning manuscripts, nothing more." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his tone unrelenting. "Cleaning manuscripts, my lord? A curious excuse. And this letter, forged in Varnum's hand, did you think it would protect you? You knew the passage, you knew his habits. You came tonight, driven by greed, to ensure the scroll was yours." Carver's shoulders slumped, but he shook his head. "I swear, I only wanted the scroll. I didn't kill him. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze piercing. Perhaps, my lord, but your actions betray you. The passage, the poison, the letter, they point to a plan, a mind that calculates. We shall see what the truth reveals. Japp nodded to the constables, who escorted Carver to the village hall for questioning. As they left the studio, the night air was cold, the stars hidden behind clouds. Japp turned to Poirot, his expression a mix of triumph and doubt. We've got him, haven't we? The vial, the letter, it's enough to hold him. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Enough to hold him, yes, but enough to convict? That, mon ami, depends on the truth. The trap has caught a fox, but is he the killer? We must be certain. The village lay silent as they walked back to the Rose and Crown, the weight of the night's events settling around them. Poirot's mind, however, was far from rest, turning over the details. The vial, the forged letter, the passage's shadow. The ebony scroll's mystery was unraveling, but one thread remained, and Poirot would not rest until it was tied. Chapter 10. The Confession. The village hall of Marwood, a sturdy stone building with a steeply pitched roof, stood at the heart of the village, its windows glowing faintly against the inky night. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the flickering light of oil lamps casting long shadows across the oak-paneled walls. Hercule Poirot sat at a heavy table, his gloved hands folded, his green eyes fixed on Lord Reginald Carver, who occupied a chair opposite, flanked by two constables. Inspector Japp stood nearby, his notebook open, his expression a blend of grim satisfaction and lingering doubt. The satchel, its damning contents, a vial of cyanide and a forged letter, lay on the table, a silent accusation. Carver's face, usually a mask of aristocratic composure, was taut, his thin lips pressed into a hard line. His hands, no longer gripping his cane, rested on his knees, fingers twitching with suppressed agitation. The weight of the trap, sprung so neatly by Poirot, pressed heavily upon him, yet his eyes held a defiant spark, as though he believed he could still outmaneuver the diminutive detective. Poirot's voice, when he spoke, was calm but unyielding, each word chosen with the precision of a calligrapher's stroke. My lord, the evidence before us is compelling. A vial of cyanide, a poison matching that which killed Edmund Varnum, a forged letter claiming he sold you the ebony scroll, a scroll that is missing, stolen from a locked studio, and your presence tonight, creeping through the secret passage to claim a decoy. These are not the actions of an innocent man. None? Carver's jaw clenched, his voice low and sharp. I told you, Poirot, I came to verify the scroll's recovery. I didn't kill Varnum. The vial is for cleaning manuscripts. Chemicals are common in my trade. As for the letter, it's a precaution, nothing more. I anticipated Varnum might renege on a deal. Japp snorted, his patience wearing thin. A precaution? Forging a man's signature after he's dead? That's a queer sort of precaution, Lord Carver, and sneaking into the studio at night, hardly the behavior of a grieving friend. Carver's eyes flashed, but he held his ground. I am a collector, Inspector. The ebony scroll is a masterpiece worth a fortune. I wanted to ensure it wasn't lost to some bungling investigation. I've done nothing criminal. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Nothing criminal, my lord? Let us reconstruct the scene. You visited Varnum yesterday afternoon at 3, yes? You knew his habits, the tea he drank each evening, the key left on the desk. You knew of the secret passage, shown to you years ago. And you knew the value of the ebony scroll, a prize you could not buy. Is it not possible that you returned after Mademoiselle Henshaw locked the door, using the passage to slip inside? Carver's hands tightened into fists, his voice rising. Preposterous. I left at 3, as I told you. I was at my manor all evening. My butler can confirm it. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint sign of his mind at work. A butler, he is loyal, non? His word, it is not impartial. Let us consider the facts. The tea was poisoned with cyanide, a poison you could procure with your wealth and connections. The scroll was taken, and you, my lord, were found tonight with a vial of the same poison and a forged letter claiming ownership. These are not coincidences. I think Carver leaned back, his eyes narrowing. You're building a house of cards, Poirot. I wanted the scroll, yes. I admit I tried to buy it, offered Varnum more than it was worth. But murder? That's beyond me. I'm no killer. Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff. Then explain the vial, Lord Carver. And the letter. You didn't bring those to the studio tonight for a lark. Carver hesitated, his composure faltering for the first time. His fingers drummed on his knee, and his gaze flickered to the satchel. The vial. It's as I said, for cleaning manuscripts. Some chemicals mimic cyanide smell. Conservators use them. The letter. I wrote it after hearing of Varnum's death, to protect my claim if the scroll surfaced. A foolish impulse, I grant you, but not murder. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice soft but relentless. A foolish impulse, my lord? Or a calculated one? Let us imagine a different story. You visit Varnum, you offer to buy the scroll, he refuses. Your pride, your ambition, they are wounded. You know the passage, you know his tea is brewed at 7. You return after Mademoiselle Henshaw leaves, slip through the passage, add cyanide to the tea, take the scroll, and leave the key to suggest a locked room. Tonight, hearing the scroll was found, you could not resist returning, fearing it was still hidden in the studio. Carver's face drained of color, his voice a hoarse whisper. No, I didn't kill him. I swear it. I took the scroll, yes, but he was already dead. The room fell silent, the words hanging like a confession in the air. Japp's eyes widened, and he leaned forward, his notebook forgotten. You took the scroll? When? Carver's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling. Last night, after 8. I used the passage. I'd remembered it from years ago. Varnum was... He was already gone, slumped in his chair. The scroll was on the desk, rolled up. I took it, thinking it was my chance. I didn't poison him, Poirot. I swear on my honor Poirot's gaze was unyielding, his mind racing. Your honor, my lord, is tarnished by theft. You took the scroll, knowing Varnum was dead, and said nothing. You forged a letter to claim ownership. These are the acts of a man with much to hide. If not the poison, what else do you conceal? Carver shook his head, his voice breaking. Nothing. I wanted the scroll. It was mine by right after all I'd offered him. But I didn't kill him. Someone else was there first. Japp exchanged a glance with Poirot, his expression torn between triumph and frustration. If you're telling the truth, Lord Carver, where's the scroll now? Carver's eyes dropped to the table, his voice barely audible. At my manor, locked in a case. I hid it, fearing suspicion. Poirot rose, his movements precise, his voice calm but commanding. We shall verify this, my lord. Inspector, send your men to Carver Hall. If the scroll is there, it is evidence, not only of theft, but of a deeper truth. Japp nodded, dispatching a constable with instructions. He turned back to Carver, his tone hard. You're not off the hook, Lord Carver. Theft's one thing, murder's another. You'll stay here until we sort this out." Carver nodded, his face ashen, his earlier arrogance replaced by a weary resignation. Poirot watched him closely, his mind turning over the confession. The scroll's recovery would be a step forward, but Carver's claim that he found Varnum already dead raised new questions. If true, who had wielded the poison? Clara, with her access and devotion? Finch, with his nervous evasions? Or the shadowy foreign visitor, a figure yet to emerge from the mist? As the constables led Carver to a holding room, Poirot turned to Japp, his voice low. "The confession, it is a crack in the facade, mon ami, but not the whole truth. Carver is guilty of theft, perhaps, but murder? I am not yet convinced. The poison, the passage, they suggest a mind more subtle than his." Japp rubbed his temples, his frustration evident. If not Carver, then who? Clara's too timid, and Finch, well, he's a bundle of nerves, but a killer? And this foreign chap keeps popping up, but we've no trace of him. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Patience, Inspector. The scroll, if found, will tell us more. And the killer, they are close, so close we can almost see them. We must look to the motives, the desires that drive the heart." The night deepened outside, the village hall's lamps casting a golden glow over the table. Poirot's mind, undeterred by Carver's confession, continued its relentless work, piecing together the mosaic of the crime. The ebony scroll, a phantom of beauty and greed, was within reach, but the truth of Varnum's death remained just beyond his grasp. The trap had caught a thief, but the murderer, Poirot knew, was still at large. Chapter 11. The Scroll's Fate. The morning broke over Marwood with a tentative sun, its rays piercing the lingering mist to cast a pale glow over the village's cobblestone streets. Hercule Poirot stood outside the village hall, his immaculate coat buttoned against the chill, his green eyes fixed on the horizon where Carver Hall loomed like a silent sentinel. Inspector Japp emerged from the hall, his face weary but triumphant, clutching a leather case that held the prize they had sought, the ebony scroll, recovered from a locked cabinet in Lord Carver's study. "It was right where he said, Poirot," Japp said, his voice gruff with satisfaction. "Hidden behind a false panel in his library, black parchment, gold ink, just as described. The constables found it last night, along with a few other manuscripts Carver shouldn't have had. He's a thief, no." Question Poirot's mustache twitched, his gaze settling on the case. "A thief, yes, mon ami, but a murderer? That remains to be seen. The scroll, it is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. Let us examine it and see what it tells us." They returned to the Rose and Crown's private parlor, where the fire had been stoked to ward off the morning's damp. Japp set the case on the table and opened it with care, revealing a tightly rolled parchment, its surface a deep, lustrous black that seemed to absorb the light. The gold lettering, though only partially visible, shimmered with an almost otherworldly beauty, each stroke a testament to Varnum's mastery. Poirot leaned closer, his gloved fingers hovering but not touching, his eyes tracing the delicate script. "Magnifique," he murmured, his voice tinged with reverence. "A work of art indeed, but why kill for it? Its value it is great, but there is something more, a secret perhaps, hidden in its creation." Japp frowned, his practical mind struggling with Poirot's abstractions. Secret or not, Carver had it. He admitted to taking it after finding Varnum dead. If he's not the killer, then who? Clara? Finch? That foreign chap Finch mentioned? Poirot straightened, his expression thoughtful. The foreign visitor, he is a shadow we must illuminate. But first, let us consider the others. Mademoiselle Henshaw, she is our next concern. Her grief, it is real, but grief can mask other motives, and Monsieur Finch, his nervousness, it suggests knowledge, perhaps guilt. Japp nodded, his notebook open. I've sent for Clara and Finch. They'll be here soon. But what about this scroll? Should we have Clara look at it, see if it's the real thing? Poirot's eyes gleamed. An excellent idea, Inspector. Mademoiselle Henshaw, as Varnum's apprentice, will know its authenticity. And her reaction, it will tell us much. Within the hour, Clara Henshaw arrived, her face pale and her hands trembling as she entered the parlor. Her gray dress was crumpled, as though she had slept in it, and her ink-stained fingers clutched a worn handkerchief. She froze at the sight of the scroll, her eyes widening with a mix of awe and sorrow. "Is that?" she whispered, stepping closer. Poirot gestured to the table. "The ebony scroll, mademoiselle. Recovered from Lord Carver's manor. Is it the work you saw on your mentor's desk?" Clara approached, her movements hesitant, and leaned over the parchment. Her fingers hovered, then drew back, as though afraid to touch it. "Yes," she said softly, her voice breaking. "It's his. The script, the way the gold catches the light, it's Mr. Varnum's work." He was so proud of it, Poirot watched her closely, noting the tears that welled in her eyes, the way her hands shook. "You admired it greatly, no? And yet it was taken, and your mentor killed. Tell me, mademoiselle, did you ever suspect Lord Carver?" Clara's gaze snapped to his, her expression torn between grief and anger. "I knew he wanted it. He was always pressing Mr. Varnum to sell, offering more money than anyone could refuse. But Mr. Varnum wouldn't budge. He said the scroll was for someone special, someone who understood its meaning." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Its meaning? Did he speak of this?" Clara hesitated, her eyes dropping to the scroll. "Not directly. He said it was more than art, that it carried a story, a legacy. I didn't understand, but he was so protective of it." Japp interjected, his tone sharp. "And you never thought to mention this before?" "Sounds like something we should have known." Clara flushed, her voice trembling. "I didn't think it mattered. He was private about his commissions. I thought it was just his way." Poirot's voice was gentle but probing. "And the vial you found, mademoiselle, the one that smelled of chemicals, could it have been cyanide left by the killer?" Clara's hands twisted the handkerchief, her eyes wide. "I don't know. It was just a vial, empty, near the bookshelf. I thought it was one of his inks, but he said it wasn't. I threw it away, as he told me." Poirot nodded, his mind turning over her words. Before he could press further, the door opened, and Tobias Finch entered, his round face flushed and his hands rubbing together nervously. He stopped short at the sight of the scroll, his eyes darting between it and Poirot. "Blimey," Finch said, his voice unsteady. "Is that it? The ebony scroll?" Poirot gestured to the table. "Indeed, Monsieur Finch. Recovered from Lord Carver's manor. You recognize it, perhaps?" Finch approached cautiously, his eyes fixed on the parchment. "I saw it once, on Varnum's desk. That black parchment, the gold ink, it's unmistakable. But I swear I had nothing to do with its theft. I'm just a supplier." Japp's eyes narrowed. "You're clear of the theft, Finch, but what about the murder?" You were in the studio that afternoon delivering ink, plenty of time to slip something into the teapot. Finch's flush deepened, his hands trembling. No, sir. I left by 6, before the tea was even brewed. I didn't touch anything but the ink I delivered. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And this foreign visitor you mentioned, monsieur? You saw him a week ago, yes? Can you describe him further? Finch hesitated, his eyes flickering to the scroll. Tall, dark coat, scarf over his face, spoke with an accent, European maybe. Varnum seemed rattled after he left, but I didn't hear much. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. The scroll is found, the thief confessed, but the killer remains. Lord Carver admits to taking the scroll, but claims Varnum was already dead. If true, someone else poisoned the tea, using the passage to escape. Mademoiselle Henshaw, Monsieur Finch, you were both close to Varnum. Did he ever speak of enemies, of threats? Clara shook her head, her tears falling freely. No, never. He was kind, respected. I can't imagine who'd want him dead. Finch nodded, his voice earnest. Same here. He was particular, but fair. No enemies I knew of. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind racing. Then the motive lies with the scroll itself, not its value, perhaps, but its purpose. Mademoiselle, you said it carried a legacy. We must uncover this legacy. He turned to Clara, his voice soft but commanding. As Varnum's apprentice, you have his skill, his spirit. Will you complete the scroll as a tribute to your mentor? Clara's eyes widened, then softened with resolve. Yes, I'll try. For him, Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Bon, and you, Monsieur Finch, you will continue your trade, but with honesty, I trust. Finch bobbed his head, his relief palpable. Aye, sir. I'm done with secrets. As Clara and Finch left, Japp turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. You're letting them go? What about the killer? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The killer, mon ami, is closer than ever. The scroll is found, Carver is exposed, but the poison, it points to another hand. We must look to the shadows, to the foreign visitor, to the legacy of the scroll. The parlor grew quiet, the fire's glow reflecting off the ebony scroll. Poirot's mind, relentless and precise, turned over the final pieces of the puzzle. The truth was near, and he would not rest until it was revealed. Chapter 12. The Departure. The morning sun rose over Marwood, its tentative rays piercing the mist that clung to the village's spires and rooftops. Hercule Poirot stood on the platform of the small railway station, his immaculate coat buttoned against the autumn chill, his Homburg hat tilted precisely. His gloved hands rested on the silver head of his cane, and his green eyes, sharp as ever, gazed at the fading outline of the village as the train's whistle echoed in the distance. Inspector Japp, beside him, adjusted his scarf, his face a mixture of relief and lingering frustration, the weight of the case still heavy on his shoulders. The ebony scroll, now safely in police custody, had been authenticated by Clara Henshaw, who had vowed to complete its unfinished script as a tribute to her mentor. Lord Carver, confined to the village hall under guard, faced charges of theft and suspicion of murder, though his claim that Varnum was already dead when he took the scroll had introduced a troubling ambiguity. Tobias Finch, cleared of direct involvement, had retreated to his shop, his nervous demeanor subdued by the resolution of the scroll's fate. Yet the true killer, the hand that had slipped cyanide into Varnum's tea, remained a shadow, elusive as the foreign visitor Finch had described. Poirot's mind, ever active, turned over the final threads of the mystery. The station platform, with its weathered boards and faint scent of coal, was a fitting stage for reflection. The case had been a tapestry of deception, greed, envy, and ambition, woven around a masterpiece of black and gold. Yet one question lingered, gnawing at the edges of his gray cells. Who had wielded the poison, and why? "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but clear. "You are troubled, I see. The scroll is found, Lord Carver is in custody, yet the truth, it eludes us still." Japp sighed, his breath misting in the cool air. "You're right, Poirot. We've got Carver for theft, and that forged letter doesn't help his case. But murder? His story about finding Varnum dead, it's thin, but it holds up if the poison was fast-acting. And this foreign chap Finch mentioned, we've no trace of him. It's like chasing a ghost." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. "A ghost, non. A shadow, perhaps, but shadows have substance if one knows where to look. The cyanide, the passage, the scroll. They point to a mind that plans, that deceives. Carver, he is guilty of greed, but the poison, it suggests another hand." Japp's eyes narrowed, his voice low. "You think Clara or Finch? Clara was there last, brewed the tea, and Finch, shifty as he is, could have slipped something in when he delivered the ink." Poirot nodded, his gaze distant as the train's rumble grew closer. "Both are possible, yet neither fits perfectly. Mademoiselle Henshaw's grief, it is genuine, but grief can mask ambition. Monsieur Finch, his nervousness suggests knowledge, but of what? And the foreign visitor, a tall man with an accent, seen by Finch a week before the crime. He is the key, I think, to the scroll's legacy." Japp scratched his chin, his frustration evident. "Legacy?" Clara mentioned something about that, a story Varnum said the scroll carried. But what's that got to do with murder? Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice steady. "Everything, mon ami. The ebony scroll was not merely art, nor merely valuable. It was a commission, a work with purpose. Varnum spoke of a private buyer, a foreign client. Suppose this scroll held a message, a secret perhaps of great import, a secret worth killing for Japp's brow furrowed, his skepticism returning. A secret in the scroll? Sounds like one of your fancies, Poirot. It's just parchment and ink." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. To the untrained eye, perhaps. But to Hercule Poirot, nothing is just what it seems. The scroll, it must be examined, not only for its beauty, but for its meaning. I have asked Mademoiselle Henshaw to study it as she completes it. She may yet uncover what Varnum hid. The train's whistle grew louder, its black silhouette emerging from the mist. Japp turned to Poirot, his voice earnest. "You're heading back to London, then?" "Leaving me to chase this shadow." Poirot inclined his head, his expression serene. "For now, Inspector. But I shall not abandon the case. The scroll is safe, Carver is detained, and the truth, it is near. I will return if needed, but you, mon ami, must watch our suspects. The killer, they will betray themselves in time." Japp clapped Poirot's shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "You've done it again, Poirot. Half solved the thing and left me to mop up. But I'll admit, you've got a knack for it." Poirot's smile widened, his eyes twinkling. "Order and method, Inspector. They reveal even the darkest secrets. The human heart, it cannot hide forever." As the train pulled into the station, its steam billowing like a curtain, Poirot boarded with his usual precision, his cane tapping lightly on the carriage steps. He settled into a compartment, his gaze fixed on Marwood's fading spires as the train began to move. The village, with its quiet lanes and hidden secrets, receded into the mist, but the mystery of the ebony scroll lingered in his mind. He leaned back, his fingers steepled, his thoughts returning to the studio, the poisoned cup, the passage's shadow. The killer was still out there, their motive tied to the scroll's elusive legacy. Clara's devotion, Finch's evasions, the foreign visitor's phantom presence, each was a thread in the tapestry Poirot wove. The truth, he knew, would emerge, as it always did, through the relentless work of his gray cells. As the train gathered speed, carrying him toward London, Poirot murmured to himself, "The scroll, it speaks. And I, Hercule Poirot, will listen." The whistle sounded once more, and Marwood vanished into the haze, leaving only the promise of answers yet to come.